It was Stephen Covey that first taught us to put first things first, and he made an absolute fortune selling that idea through his books and seminars. But that concept is true because a major part of success of living our lives is the ability to put first things first. You know what? Most of us don't do that because the main things are usually the harder things. And that is the main reason most of our major goals are not achieved either. Yes, because it's easier to do the easy things rather than do the hard things first. Thank you, Stephen Covey.
Now, I just want to spend a few minutes expanding on that concept of put first things first. In fact, Put First Things First is the name of the third chapter of a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen Covey. Now, that first book was written in 1989 and has sold over 30 million copies since. Then, in 1994, the publishers put out an expanded version of that chapter, the third chapter, and called it First Things First. And it came out as a paperback. Now, everything that was done in those days was designed around a matrix that a man called General Dwight Eisenhower put together back in the late 40s or the 50s. In fact, he became the president of the United States for the bulk of the 1950s. Now, he was considered by many to be a brilliant man. He was also a man that had an international status behind him, despite the fact that most people in their own countries only concentrated on their own country and were not internationally well known. He was an exception, and so much of an exception. I remember my father sitting me down at probably about the age of 9 or 10 years old, explaining the brilliance of General Dwight Eisenhower. Now, I'm sure my dad, like most people at the time, didn't quite understand or didn't quite grasp what General Dwight Eisenhower had created. And it wasn't until Stephen Covey started to unravel everything that General Eisenhower did in his book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And when I got hold of that book in the early 1990s, I couldn't put it down because it was so full of gems and nuggets that I kept learning and learning. And what I've learned, I want to pass on to you in the remainder of this module. Now, Stephen Covey says you need to be clear about your priorities. Now, to many of us, that sounds easy, but he also goes on to say that you can easily get sidetracked if you're not fully clear about your priorities. And the other thing is your priorities need to be tied to the context or the focus of your life at the time. So most of us won't be able to apply any daily priorities this way because they may not be adding value to your life. And that's an important issue here because your daily priorities can only apply if you're adding value to the life you're leading or you're about to lead. Now, remember, Covey's concept is based on Eisenhower's vision, and that vision breaks down into 4 quadrants. 1, reminders. 2, planning. 3, prioritizing. 4, leadership qualities. And as I expand on each of those quadrants, it'll help you clarify the way you need to set your goals either in the present or for the future. The first quadrant is reminders, which are also your priorities. Now, in this quadrant, you need to break it into 3 parts. The first is the priorities, because your priorities must be tied to your long-term vision or your long-term goal. Otherwise, they could be ineffective. Now, the second part is your medium-term vision or medium-term goals, and they need to be treated as tasks to be accomplished in order to accomplish your priorities. And the third part is your short-term vision or short-term goals. And the easiest way to work with your short-term vision or short-term goals is to work with a to-do list. Now, you can do this daily, you can do this weekly, you can do this monthly, you can do it twice a week, twice a month, whichever you prefer, but it must be done with a to-do list on each occasion. So remember, it's broken into three parts on purpose. The first is your priorities. They must be tied to your long-term goals or vision, otherwise they will not work. The other two need to be additives to your priorities on each occasion. Now, the second quadrant is planning and preparation. And what I like about this quadrant is it makes you personally accountable for everything that you do. So in order to work in this quadrant, you'll need to evaluate everything and then decide what's important. And remember three things. Your priorities are your long-term evaluation. Your tasks are your medium-term evaluation, and your to-do list are your short-term evaluation. So remember this, evaluate, and you'll become personally accountable for everything you do. Now, the third quadrant is prioritizing and controlling. Now, in order to appreciate what this means, is please appreciate that everybody's common goal is to have a successful career. But until you know how to control your career, you won't have a successful career, because by controlling a career, you're moving it to a level above your long-term vision or your long-term goal. And once you appreciate and understand this concept, you're then understanding that what you're developing is no longer a career, but a lifestyle encased in your career. And the fourth quadrant is leadership qualities. Now, here's something that you'll need to personalize, because you also need to understand that you can't lead others until you can lead yourself effectively. Now, to become a good leader of anyone and yourself, you'll need discipline, self-control, focus, and determination, because without those four qualities, you can neither become an effective leader nor will you be able to lead yourself. Now, remember, Covey's concept is based on Eisenhower's vision, and that vision breaks down into four quadrants. 1, reminders. 2, planning. 3, prioritizing. 4, leadership qualities.